All right, fight number 6. And to be honest with you, this is a fight when we made the list initially. This was just kind of still happening. And if there's one fight where I'm kind of happy this took place a few years later, this might be the one I was really excited to revisit. And this fight is Orvos and friends, because there's so many people in this fight, versus Goldune, the climax to chapter 7. This fight, it to me, is the epitome of final boss. This is everything you want to have in your climax of a chapter. This is everything you've been building up towards. And Goldune just works so well as an antagonist that while this is Orvos' antagonist, this is also anybody else's antagonist because he's just that good at what he does. There's not a single character whose nerves or Goldune hasn't rattled throughout Chapter 7. And this guy just being this final boss fight, which takes place thanks to Zombie's art, takes place in this like chasm with a sky core in the a failing sky core in the background, and giant faces and like vine tentacles coming out of the walls, and golems coming forward, and illusion magic. It's like everything we had seen through the various trials like leading up to this one, all of it's at play in this final fight. Zombie manages to bring in every element we've shown so far into one final confrontation, which like it almost feels like a video game boss fight in the best ways because it's all the skills you've learned all being having to pay it off now in this final ultimate test. He has this amazing opening dialogue, which is I've killed a great many parents, little girl. That doesn't exactly narrow it down. As for the rest of you, I agree, Zach. The time for talk is over. I don't care what bottomless amounts of explosives you got tucked away, Gearhart. In the end, I still win. I always win. Let's cement it though. With the Sky Island's death, we'll all go down swinging. And I love this monologue for so many reasons, but I also love it because it includes other characters. He talks to Zack in this, he talks to Kit in this, he talks to Gearhart in this. And these aren't even the main focus. This is an Orvos. This is how well Goldune works as just a villain to everybody he meets.
It doesn't feel like just any kind of boss fight either. It feels like one you would expect from the end of a Final Fantasy game or like a Dark Souls game.
Yeah, no, definitely the video game vibe is all over this guy.
Yeah, I feel like it really works in this in this instance, since we basically had a year's worth of build-up of just it's like slowly mounting dread of like who the I'm trying to think of a right word, like who like the god of the island was and all that. So having it all like be spelled out here, and just seeing Gul'dun's reveal and such, it was just it all came together in this absolutely fantastic way. Oh, I just want to say, like, in terms of like presentation and such, this is gonna sound pretty minor, all things considered, but I like how Zombie used like spoiler tags in order to like slowly trickle in like the Gul'dun's like appearance and such.
Yeah, Zombie's entire like presentation, the artwork. I think he draws like five or probably at least 3 to 5 different pieces for this throughout this fight, just to
Mm,
help like illustrate what's going on. Really, really gets it higher on this list because, as we said, art isn't like a major factor, but it would be foolish to ignore that extra what that extra effort does for a fight.
and just plus also the usage of music and two and such, since he's always been really good about that, but here I think it just really helps elevate the fight even further.
I also really said I appreciate how Zombie like will through his writing for Goldoon, he's constantly referencing other characters. There's a little bit later in the fight where he essentially makes each of them face a specific illusion, and like or there's a different character talking to them. Like Zach hears Millie screaming when she actually isn't. Um, Goldoon essentially taunts every single member in one way or another. And to be able to do what's like a 1 versus 6 fight and be in control the entire time, that's just impressive.
It's over a long period of time too. Like I'm going over the pages now, and it starts on 43, and it's not like a slugfest or anything. It's just kind of a marathon. It doesn't stop until 58.
And there's so many different people contributing to that fight too.
Mm,
And we're talking a lot about Golden, but I think we should take a moment to appreciate Orvos as the other end of this one as well. Because you can't really talk about this fight without talking about Orvos and Golden's relationship. This is the climax in many ways of Orvos' character arc. And it does feel like a little bit of an early climax, given we still have so much story left to go. But you can't argue with what this means for him. This is the moment where I like to me, this is the moment where Orvos joins the crew. This is where he drops a line where he goes, Zach, Gearhart, Leto, Millie, Bedalia. Let's put an end to this. Whatever happens, it's time to turn the page. And it's the fact that he calls out each crew member by name and is like 100% relying on them to overcome his demon. This is Orvos is joining the crew. This is Orvos is facing his past. This is Orvos really coming into his own as a sky pirate, and it's just such a good place for it. It works so well with everything that built up to it. Just this is just really just top tier writing at the best.
Mhm.
And we have to give credit to Griller as well because she was a newcomer to this chapter, and all throughout it, you get a sense for Millie and how she thinks and how she interacts with people and just how she sort of naturally integrates with the rest of the crew when the chips are down.
She's one of the best combo plays in this entire thing with Leto, which is the where she holds down one of the golems, and Leto does the really awesome move where he actually uses his power to steal one of Golden's golems and gets at the fight. That's Leto. Like we talk about team plays, that's Leto and Millie right there.
I'm going to clip this letter praise real quick. Don't
No,
mind me.
I'm gonna delete it. Don't worry. You
Mhm,
see,
mhm.
like when you play it back, it's just gonna sound like static. It's gonna be like impossible to hear. It's gonna give you a nosebleed.
Oh man. But no, yeah, getting off like what Rue said, I just Grilla basically had to hit the ground running for this with this, big climactic boss fight and stuff, and she did a fantastic job with like integrating Millie with the rest of the crew, and just developing this like really good rapport, especially with Zach, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the early foundations of their continuing relationship, and it's something I hope we get to explore, later in another chapter because since this chapter, they haven't had an action scene together like this.
Hmm.
no, and to
So
be
it's been
honest,
a while.
and to speak to Carlos too, this is her debut. Not even her debut fight. This is her debut chapter. We're still figuring out. People are often still figuring out what the character is about at this point in the writing. They haven't completely figured out what I want to do with them. They don't completely know how they want them to fit into the greater story yet. So the fact that Griller just takes the time to play the support role in this fight, but in a way where she's always active, is definitely a testament to her writing skills. Because that's a tough nut for anyone's essentially debut fight. But Griller is not the only person who has some awesomeness in this fight. Almost every single character does something pretty like amazing. Like Gearhart gets definitely a handful of really great moments in this one with his explosives, and ends up being one of the key things that takes out Goldune at the end of the day. Because Gearhart just ends up like at one point he's like climbing the sky score and like with a bag of explosives and like stuffing it down there with like kicking it down with his boot into the cracks. Really good writing for him. The only little fussness I had on that one was he does kind of pull out the best explosive moves really, really early in the fight, and it kind of like doesn't work because just from a narrative point, it's too early for that to work.
Yeah.
So it kind of gets downplayed a little bit more than it should. But then I also love later on how Zombie will embellish that because Gearhart kind of does it a second time, and it's actually a fake core. And Golding's like, I'm not falling for the same trick twice. It's great how that ends up coming back around though.
And then we even get our guest character by Dewey Kit, who doesn't participate in the action directly, but helps. Like that's the character that gets a hold of Zach's caster pistol when he loses his grip on it and brings it back at a critical moment.
Which is the perfect moment for like to do with that kind of little kid, like cute kid characters. Like, even if it's just there being a goal for it, it's like that contributes to the ending because this is a fight everyone contributes to. Like there's a
Hmm.
sequence where I think everyone's like running around, dodging vines, and doing whatever they can to keep Goldie distracted while they set up for the final moment. But Dahlia is a very quiet, unsung hero in this fight where she doesn't do anything big at all, but she's keeping. She never falls into a trap either. She just holds her own for the entirety of the fight, letting all the other characters really kind of have those spotlight moments.
But this is also a fight where it doesn't go all the hero's way. This is, and it kind of, I think it may have gotten a little lost to time in the years since, but this is the fight that gives Zack his famous scars on the arm.
Yeah, that's from when Millie does like a bandaging, right? And it turns out not to be a good match.
Well, I mean, to begin with, because this is when I think it's after Goldoon merges with the core and the vines start coming down. the vine, Golden grabs Zack with the vines, to try to stop him, get the gun that he's using, and just try to take Zack out of the fight. And he frees himself, but at the cost of his arm. And then Millie comes in with the bandages after that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like it's definitely one of those fights where everyone really kind of plays their role and gets a chance to kind of do something, like which is really hard to do in a group fight. There's probably only really one other final boss fight where we kind of get that same energy. There's not really even a lot of criticism for this fight. It's just a good fight all around.
Mhm.
I think like probably like some of my favorite bits is the Orvos's dissecting of the fight too, because it's so much of this is also a psychological fight of like Goldoon throwing insults. Like page 54, I'm not going to read off the whole thing because it's essentially would be reading the whole post off, but like he tries to needle himself into every single person's psychosis, but then like on the next page there's a post from Orvos on 55 where he's like essentially rallying the troops and coming up with the final plan for the final push, and he's just like, I know you hate me, father. He's like, you can finally take your revenge. So he takes that attention and brings it on him without like stealing the scene from everybody else. And it's just such a really good way to do them, because I don't even think Orvos gets the final hit on this fight.
He doesn't. Like, I'm looking at it right now. He provides the opening for Gerhardt and Zack to finish it off.
Yeah, which is just like such an interesting concept, but from a symbolic standpoint of like this is Goldoon or this is Orvos joining the crew. Like Goldoon doesn't join the crew. Oh no. Of Orvos joining the
I
crew.
mean, don't say never.
yesterday's enemies, today's friends. But no, yeah, like letting like trusting the crew to finish this fight for him. There's definitely something that he said about Orvos's character growth by like letting that action happen, because he's not doing it all alone anymore. He trusts them to get the job done.
Hmm. Power of friendship and all that.
Yeah, our friends defeat God or fake God in this situation.
And honestly, just looking at the fight as a whole and the chapter as a whole, I feel like Zombie did a really good job with giving everyone like motivation to take down Gul'dan, since he's not just we're not just fighting him because he's in our way. He's also spent the entire chapter just absolutely like picking apart the crew, trying to like insulting them, just trying to get under their skin. So there's this kind of like catharsis in actually having a face to punch, I guess you could say, and just actually being able to, take him down and such.
Oh yeah, no, there's nobody like unlike the Crow fight from earlier we talked about earlier. No one feels bad when Goldoon loses. It's complete catharsis in the best way
No,
possible.
yeah, Zom did a fantastic job with making Gul'dan like someone who is, just flat out evil without, while at the same time managing to, make him feel in depth, making him not feel like some, like one note character. It's just a very, very good balancing act, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, for sure. And there's also this fight too. Talking about more just the fight in general, is this fight also has a good consequence, which is a setup for the next chapter, which is this is where Leto starts losing his memory.
Mhm.
Like I think we had been seeing it like gradually since chapter 6, but this is where like I think even in how you do your posting formats for this one, like you start like not including letters in like the format and stuff, and there's like random gaps in the spacing that kind of indicate that his brain is starting to break a little bit. And
Mhm.
this fight also sets up future events for the story, which is also really just it's a good point of a fight because it's not just resolving something; it's setting the next thing up, which keeps that flow going really well.
Exactly. I mean, even as we can see in this current chapter, Gul'dan is still having a bit of an influence on things, not only on Orvos, but just the
Well,
overall RP itself.
and he sets up, and honestly, this is also like him getting to possess the Aura Drinker. Gets us an excuse to use the cultists again, which ends up being a bigger play for what comes up down the road down as well,
Mhm.
because we know who Arya ends up actually being, and also it's just because we're behind the scenes. This was part of the reason why I very much encouraged Goldu to take the mantle of the Aura Drinker, was to help set up that misdirect.
Ah,
Haha, I'm so
sneaky.
clever. Well, I think that's all I gotta say on this fight. I said the only things that keeps this fight from being a little higher on the list is it is a lit. I want to say there's a couple not errors, but maybe trip ups or like little slips where like Gearhart's early bomb or Badali doesn't really get like a really nice good moment, or Millie's completely in the supportive. Like there was like maybe a chance to showcase her poison would have been a good place for this year. Lots of stuff you could definitely only really kind of know about in hindsight.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to kind of get that lightning in a bottle at the moment. But like these are nitpicks on a really solid structure.
Yeah, I mean, considering how we had like 6+ characters like going at it, I feel like this was some kind of understandable
Oh, 100
pros and
percent.
cons. Yeah.
Yeah, no. The more characters you get involved in a fight, the harder it is to keep that fight feeling consistent.
And also, I just want to say I do appreciate how Gul'dan's death plays out. How we had that like one flashback of both him and Orvos meeting for the first time. It's just a very nice bookends
Mm.
between their like first meeting and like their final meeting.
And there's also the fact that Golden doesn't even die in this fight. He actually transfers his
No.
conscious to Zeke at the very end, which is like we were very careful when we
That
were writing
bastard.
this to make sure Zeke was on Stone Tablet on the surface while Golden was going down. So there was that like if you go and read back and look at the posts, Zeke was specifically where we needed to be him at the exact same time Golden went down.
Hmm.
Because like we were trying to like set that up, and it works well into like Goldune is deception in many ways. I think that even in Zombie's art, he references this fight as the final deception. So getting that like he also like deceives everybody one last time and doesn't die, it just plays so well into the theming there.
Hmm.
That's not all I got to
Also,
say on this fight, but if you guys got more,
I just want to say one minor thing. I do like how Gul'dan's initial plan was to try and possess Zack, which would have been the most terrifying thing ever.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it
Bad
was
news for everybody.
yeah. I think he was looking at like Zach, he was looking at Relton. I think there was one other person he was looking at. It might have been Geo. As like
Makes sense.
possible good, like really powerful candidates. And then he ends up getting freaking Zeke.
Well,
Good old scrawny axe wielding Zeke, who does not make our list. Good character, not a good fighter. You have anything to add on this, Brew?
No, I think we've covered it pretty well.
Alrighty then. Let's move on to the next good fight on this list. We're entering top 5 territory. And
ho ho ho.
I also feel this is the territory where a lot more of our bias shows. So
I don't know what you're talking about.
there might be some rioting in the comments, all 3 of them. So that'll be fun. But here we go. Let's go get into number 5.
Okay. Anyways, fight number 5 happens to be Zachariah Burns versus the Ashen Regiment. Uh, page number is 7, and it is in chapter 1, way back in the year of 2016. Wow. Anyways, just to give some context, similar like just like how we mentioned back in the very first video for this top 10 list, chapter 1 involves a crew, yeah, a group of former pirates under Isaac who have since left since Isaac's vanishing, have returned in order to try and take over the Tempest Edge. And among this crew are a group of mercenaries called the Ashen Regiment, led by one Oya Ianza. Is that how you
That's
pronounce it?
close enough. I don't know any better. It's African, I can tell you that.
Okay, so yeah, basically, during this whole the ensuing scuffle, Oya and her men come face to face.
Who are totally not stormtroopers.
No, no, they're legally distinct.
Legally distinct
Don't
stormtroopers.
sue us, Disney, please.
Yeah.
Anyways, they end up coming face to face with Zack, which leads us to this fight.
This fight being so early in the story and being so small might make people kind of raise like their eyebrows a little bit. Like, why is this fight so high on the list? The
It's actually the
reason
earliest fight in the entire of the list, I think.
it might be because they had Leo versus Rashid, which May was like our like number 15 for our 14 fight, way higher up on this list. It was a little bit later after this guy. But the reason this fight in particular makes the list is we've talked about this kind of term on and off a lot, which we refer to as debut fights. This is Zach's debut fight, and there might not be a better debut fight in the entire. Actually, no, I think I can. I'm gonna say it. There's no better debut fight in the entirety of the series. When it comes to a debut fight, we're looking at things like what does this fight tell us about this character, and this fight tells us everything we need to know about Zach. It showcases his skills, it showcases his ideology, it showcases his quick wittiness, it showcases his weaknesses. It is this fight, if putting Zach how he's going to fight for the rest of the story in a bottle, everything we need to know is on display here. And one of the things I really like about this fight is, yeah, it's one guy fighting a bunch of characters, but given Zack is a deadly sharpshooter who shoots to kills, the fact he gets to have this 1 verse 15 fight really lets Zack actually do that. He lets him get his kills. And there's like these like a whole bunch of blurbs of how Rue writes this. One of my favorite ones is there's a section at the very beginning, and it goes to the outside observer. What happened took place over the course of 3 seconds. 5 shots thundering through the narrow space of the door into the hallway. All that were nearby to hear them. A flash of light throwing shadows against the walls. And then the following paragraph, which I'm not going to read verbatim, is the breakdown of what happens in those 5 shots. And it's that Han Solo shot first kind of moment where it's like bam, 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 and then like we break it down, we rewind, and we break it down, and we show just how accurate it is, how he shoots this, causes this chain reaction. It just really puts all of Zach's skills and wits and intelligence on display.
And it's one of my favorite ways to do it from that chapter onward. Like I try to do it at least once every chapter if he gets into a fight that needs it.
That's like almost
Just
like
because
that
I think
bullet time idea.
it just always felt like a great way to present something that otherwise would be over in a matter of seconds or milliseconds even.
Yeah, and like it breaks it down, and it also feels kind of Wild West, which works well for Zach's character. There's just so much to say about this fight with the Ashen Regiment that's like it's very short, but there's no wasted space in this fight. Everything Lee plays into the next thing, plays into the next thing, and this is where we kind of get to that point where we're kind of starting to stray away from group fights and more to the one-on-ones, where you do get that like much more succinct, coherent flow. And I think even without me and Rue ever talking about it back in the day, because I played the Ashen Regiment, we kind of knew. I think just like on a subconscious sinking level, we knew exactly what we needed out of this fight without ever needing to go into it. Because one of the things I like about this fight is the Ashen Regiment isn't like the joke is they're stormtroopers. That's literally because of the opening mooks, and like the arc for them is like based off stormtroopers. But they operate at least with some squad tactics. They have some special arcane bullets themselves. The squad leader actually like recognizes Zach's caster shell and like has them adjust their strategy accordingly. So these are mooks, but these are like organized mooks who are using tactics and cover and suppressive fire and stuff like that. So Zach's not just like gunning down mooks easily; he's gunning down like smart mooks, which makes Zach seem even more impressive by comparison.
It's a template I try to copy whenever I take control of mooks as well. Sort of a base upon which future military characters have been built.
Yeah, and this entire fight takes place in the fourth level of the Tempest Edge, and it's like in the cargo bay area. So it's a lot of like they're always kind of in the main center of the cargo bay because they're trying to steal some cargo. Because at this point they're like, this operation's going to shit. We're gonna at least steal some of their shit and make a small profit before we get out. And Zach's like kind of like around them the entire time, like kind of almost doing a circle on their perimeter. So they're like shooting outwards the entire time while he's shooting inwards, and he's like moving. He talks about like stray shots and knocking out his coat. Um, and like he ends up pulling out his caster halfway through. And this is where we also get to see the caster debut, which is really good because like how Rue ends up using the caster here just really showcases why it's more than just an average gun.
Mhm. And I do like how the commander Aouria tries to like negotiate with him, tries to like convince him to hand over the caster, I believe, and just like this like brief moment of like calm before the storm, and then how afterwards like Zach just first time we really get to see the caster being used with like Zach firing off a fire shell, I think it was, like right into the middle of them, and followed by that one like really cool like one liner, like you asked for, just like that.
Oh, my favorite moment with the caster shells is when he grabs a can of antifreeze and he throws the antifreeze like over their rifles and it explodes, and then he fires the electric shell into the antifreeze tin and it creates this like liquid electricity rain on all of them. Oh, it's just so cool.
I I actually remember that moment very well because before I committed to writing it down, I was like, does antifreeze conduct electricity? So I spent like 10 minutes looking it up to see if it actually would.
Zach just pulls out his phone mid-fight and Googles that.
Just hold on 1 second. We need like just like a little T with his hands. Time out. I need to research something real quick. Pulls out like Leto's bird. Goes, Leto, antifreeze. Is it conductible?
It's a kind of magic that I lost for a long time until I want to say chapter 6 because it was an establishment of tactics that for a little while just didn't get used again.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's definitely because Zach's at his best when he's doing tactical fighting, and we kind of see it again. The other fight that almost took this spot was Zack versus the Kappa Rangers, because it's kind of this. This is a very similar beast to this fight, but when it came down to just like pure smooth motions and no wasted space and everything feeling like it's serving its specific purpose, this fight edged out Kappa Rangers because of just how well it displays what Zack is as a character.
Mhm. And
Right.
on that note, and in terms of like establishing characters, I just want to say I appreciate how like this fight and the fight with Leo and Rashid were like going on simultaneously because we have Leo's fight, which is all flashy and like one on one and stuff, and then meanwhile we have Zack's fight, which is brutal, pragmatic, just
Precise, deadly.
precise, which I know helps show off their contrast and kind of helps foreshadow like them butting heads later on down the line.
Yeah, because like here you have every single member of this crew dies. Like Zack kills 15 people in this fight, and then Leo
Yeah.
upstairs only knocks out Rashid. He doesn't even like Rashid goes to prison. It is a really good parallel to what is going to be their ideological differences on how to handle combat, and we get to see that in both their debut fights.
Exactly.
But yeah, like I said, like there's a lot of really good things in here. Any little nitpicks I have is maybe in the arcane rifle lore. When I was rereading this fight, I'm like, I think I would tweak what arcane rifles are because they are a little too similar to what makes casters special. But those are like those are more world building tweaks than like an actual piece of this fight itself. Just a really, there's not like I'll say like there's not a lot to say because it's kind of short, but there's also not a lot to say because it's just good. Like I don't have nitpicks with this fight. There's no wasted momentum. It times itself perfectly to the events happening around it. Zack is just like a badass through every single scene. He's always in control. It's everything you want from a debut fight.
I think it is something that helps, showcase something that I like to emphasize with Zack in particular, and maybe many other characters. Is that he's just a regular human guy, and he deals with the situations as they come. In a
He's
sentence,
a
but
regular human dude. He's got a magic gun, and otherwise he makes do with what the environment around him.
yeah, and so he's not like some of our other characters who have, super advanced martial arts skills or can pull up a magic shield in an instant. He
Yeah,
just
no.
has to make do with what he has.
Yeah, the very down to earth aspect of it, which is definitely in this fight because there's like nothing in this fight that like feels like you could see this fight in either an anime format or a live action format, and it would feel like just fine in both those environments.
Which is something I always try to strive for aesthetically.
Yeah,
Anyway,
you nailed it here. So, anyways, I think that concludes fight number 5, and we can move on. Fight number 4, the one I'm not biased on. Leto and Sojo vs. Strident, found in chapter 5, starting on page 20. Is that right? Page 20?
Yep. Page 20 to page 28.
Yes, this is an interesting one because this is also a very short fight. It's almost like we were biasing towards short fights because it was made our job easy towards the end. Obviously, that's not the case when we get to the
We
final
would never
three.
do that.
No, never. This fight is really here because of what this fight means for the character of Leto. In the first 4 chapters of the story, Leto is not a combatant, and even at this point, he's not really a combatant yet either. Like he doesn't fight. He's always in a support role, support capacity. He had like in chapter 2 and chapter 1, he like really like I don't want to say he's a coward, but like it's definitely he's like not doesn't want to be on the front lines. He's a shut in his room. He kind of like bows to Cornwith in chapter 2. This is a character who has very much established himself is not living up to his expectations of being a thing, and he's okay with it. But this is what happens when he's forced to make that choice, forced to be a hero, and to have to take the spotlight, and how he handles it, and it handles so goddamn well. Even I have to acknowledge Leto's growth in this 8 pages fight is just top tier writing because it's like the combat's on display only okay. There's a couple clever plays, but there's nothing really that crazy. The person he's fighting, Strident, is also not really a big fighter. They're definitely another character who kind of operates from behind the scenes and does this more of a support role as the artillery officer. But it forces Leto to really have to come into his own, and what this means for this character going forward is just so important and just so well articulated here. This fight had to be in the top 5.
No, yeah, I definitely do feel like it was a big catalyst for his ensuring character development.
So the fight opens with the events on the airfield. and there's kind of explosions going on. We're at the point where the heist is very much gone wrong, and we're in war zone mode. Leto is working with Velnai, who he's just told off to go on a scouting mission to support Kotanai. And we're at the point where we're essentially going through all the Curios, other than Sojo, has been gone down, and they come under attack under Stridon, who is the artillery officer or explosions expert. Which one's more accurate?
Demolitions.
Demolition. That's the word. Demolitions expert of Light Company.
He's kind of like a combat engineer, you would say.
And he's very extravagant. In everything he does, because he's like almost like, I think my favorite scene with him is, and it's not in this fight, but it's an earlier, where he's like sitting on a bridge with like, he's pretending to be like an orchestra conductor as explosions go off, and he's like, you can tell he hears the melody in his head that no one else can hear as the explosions are going off, and he's conducting the artillery barrage. It's such a he's such a almost flamboyant character, and it works really well because he has so much confidence to the anti-confidence that is Leto, that these two being the matchup is just great. So we get into this fight where they're on the airfield, and Stridon sets his sights on the Curios, and he essentially throws a grenade at them. And this is where one of Leto's fun, clever plays comes in, and he grabs the grenade, throws it back in the truck, and then uses his magic on the truck to like put it into the engine into gear, and the truck drives right into Stridon. And then like it explodes. Sojo opens up with bullets, and there's this excellent little blurb from Stridon, which is lunging forward. Stridon grabbed a dying marine by the collar of his chest armor before he could fall, using him like a shield as he ran to cover behind the building. The body jerked several more times before Stridon let it fall, and it rolled behind the wall of the hangar. Bullets spanking off the metal siding. My apologies, fellows, he mutters to the very dead men who had accompanied him, which just thoroughly is an example of like this, like Stridon's not a good person. He is very, very tone deaf to death, and he's like almost too comfortable in this situation.
It's kind of a character trait with him that he is. I guess it's not a trait, but like one of the things that's wrong with him is that he's sort of. I guess the older term is manic depressive, and right now he's in his manic phase, so he's sort of just letting things bounce off of him.
I think that's a pretty good explanation. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not that he wouldn't be concerned. Like there's a moment at the end where he clearly feels like he's failed the men that were accompanying him, because it's like one of the things is that all throughout this fight he's calling these two guys that are with him by different names, even though he was introduced to them earlier on. And it's only after he realizes that they've both been killed that he remembers what their names are. And so it's not that he doesn't feel it; it just takes a while to sink in that this is all a real thing that happened.
Yeah.
But but it also works really well, as I said, as that counter to Leto, who is overly aware of everything that's happening, who is like he is struggling in his environment. This is like not where he wants to be. This is not his expertise. This is not his experience. So it just works really well as a nice mirror image to Leto. And he's such a good character for Leto to go up against.
Yeah, I feel like the actual fight itself is more of like a mental battle for Leto, with him.
It really is.
Like keep calm, not go into a full-on panic attack, and just try and just just keep himself together and actually do something rather than cowering like he did with Corinth back in chapter 2.
Yeah, and like I think to that point, I think I want to read like this. There's a blurb from one of Volt's posts, which I think really kind of sums up the turning moment for Leto, which is after Stridon ends up throwing another set of explosions at them after the truck incident, and it knocks Sojo out of the fight. So Leto's officially on his own, and Leto's like lying on the ground. And there's just this moment where it's described as he struggled to his feet, ignoring the pain on his burnt arm as he shifted his attention towards the directions of the one responsible for it. The half-fae moved, ears ringing, so loudly that he could scarcely hear his own footsteps. He pushed himself as hard as he could, stumbling to walk, evolving as much into a sprint as his ailing body could muster. Will alone propelled him forward to the point the boy is not even having the strength to care about anything else. There is but a single thought on his mind, forcing himself forward despite how much he begged for a break. throwing caution to the wind, not granting a single concern towards one's ailments, stubbornness beyond reason. Deep down, a part of him wondered, is this how it feels to be a Thane? This is, like, I think a really good terminology, because I think if there's any character out of the Thane siblings that really struggles with the idea of living up to their family name and like that actually matters to them, it's Leto.
Hmm.
Like Leo almost has his almost resentment for his family name.
Yeah.
Kotanai and Gearhart easily accept their roles as like Thane siblings. Like they have no problems with it. They've come to terms with it. Leto feels unworthy of it. So this moment of him paralleling the idea of being courageous to the idea of being a Thane is such an interesting idea for him, because like Leto's whole mindset is, if I do this, I might be good enough for my dad. I might be good enough for my siblings, and that's like the motivational factor. And it's such a good way to work that into his character arc, because there's something like thematic about it.
Yeah, no, like I said, I kind of wanted this point to be like a big, like, turning point for him to like showcase him trying to like shake off the whole introvert, you know, constantly afraid vibe. So I'm pretty happy with this, I suppose.
Oh, it's great, and then essentially it all boils down with Leto throwing a punch. There's no
Mhm.
grand play. There's no caster
Not just
shells.
not just throwing a punch, but charging out of cover directly at the guy.
Yeah, like it's a punch Strider sees coming. There's nothing. There's no deceit behind it. It's just like Dewey has a lovely little animation for it.
It's one of my
Oh
favorite
man,
pieces of
yeah.
art that's ever come out of this whole thing.
Thank you, dude. You're awesome.
Yes, just it's amazing. It's an amazing little shot, and it embodies the emotion of it so well, which is just this like like you can almost get the energy that Leto's betting everything on this. It's like,
Hmm.
I'm out of my element. I don't like this. I don't want to be here. But if I'm gonna be here, I'm giving it 100%, and I'm gonna make myself better for it. And it's
Hmm.
all that, like all that emotion, that anxiety, that fear, that power, that hope. It's all behind that punch, and that's why I think this fight works so well. Is because so rarely do we get so much emotion behind a single blow that like it hits, and it the punch hits Stridon ends up blowing himself up, and that's the fight. There's
Hmm.
the which is also, there's a nice irony of Stridon, the Demolition Man, blowing himself up. There's just a good little kind of joke there, even though Stridon ends up not dying from it.
And as we've learned, it has left a permanent mark on him.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a part of me that kind of would have liked to seen Stridon go down here, just because of how like impartial he is to death around him, but I also really, really like Stridon and want to see more of Stridon, so I'm willing to be happy with the other way.
Yeah, not to mention, I think him having to live with the consequences of his men dying and stuff is definitely adds to his character.
And that might
Like,
be something definitely for the if Stridon ever shows up again for exploring. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Ideas for Rue. If Rue ever
Who
listens to
can
this.
who can say?
say indeed.
Kind of like with a lot of the top 5 fights, it's hard to kind of go into them in critical detail because they're just good. Like, there's not a lot of negatives to be said. The closest negatives that can be said is it's kind of short, but given this is both a fight, but it's also a moment. It really, really works here. Because like the only other fight that we might have put here would have been Kaya and Leto versus Cornrith and Raziel that we talked about earlier. But this is just that Leto moment way better on display. That's all I got to say on this guy.
Um,
Yeah, I think it's pretty well covered.
yeah, honestly, I believe I have much to say either. Just I enjoyed writing the fight, and I'm glad that it worked out.
But before we get into our top 3, we need to take this moment to thank our sponsors, Raid Shadow Legends.
Ah!
I'm quitting the call.